My buddy Tom and I always looked for adventures, especially when Halloween was around the corner. We were both 18 years old, and with Halloween just a couple of days away, we were eager for some spooky fun. Tom came up with the idea to explore an old abandoned diner that was a few miles out of town. To be honest, the place didn't look too run down from the outside. It was a normal diner that had closed down maybe 3 years back, and since then, no one had bought it. Because of that, trash piled up around it, and some of the windows were shattered. On the night of Halloween, we grabbed a small bag, threw in a couple of flashlights, and drove to the diner. We parked a little way down the street and walked up to the building. The diner looked way scarier in the dark, and I started to feel a bit uneasy. When we got to the entrance, we saw a kid's bike propped against the window. I had expected other thrill seekers might be there because it was Halloween, but seeing just one bike felt odd. Tom tried the front door, but it was locked. We walked around to the side and discovered a small door that was ajar. Cautiously, we entered through the side door and found ourselves in the kitchen. The kitchen was a mess, with broken glass and empty cans everywhere. We continued into a back room with a few chairs and a table, all covered in dust and dirt. It was clear others had been there before us, probably using the place as a hideout. We hadn't been there long, exploring and looking at the graffiti on the walls, when we suddenly heard a noise coming from the front of the diner. I've always thought buying used items made a lot of sense. Sometimes I tell myself it's because I want to help the environment by reducing waste. But honestly, it's also because I want to save some cash. So when I needed a new computer, I naturally turned to Craigslist. I spent about an hour looking at different options and checking their details. Finally, I settled on a laptop that was 2 years old and had a noticeable crack in its screen. Aside from the crack, the laptop looked in good condition. I figured the crack explained the low price, which made me feel like I was getting a decent deal. Otherwise, I'd wonder why someone would want to sell such a good laptop so cheap. I called the seller and we agreed on a time to meet. We settled on $500. I tried to negotiate the price down a bit, but he wasn't budging. It was okay, though. $500 was still reasonable. After work, I drove to pick it up. My car is really fast, and I get a lot of looks from people when I drive by. We had agreed to meet in a shopping mall parking lot not far from where I live. As I got there, I spotted a young guy wearing a blue baseball cap, holding a laptop. He was of average height and looked quite uninterested in what was happening around him. Everything seemed normal as I parked my car in the lot. We quickly said hello, exchanged the money and the laptop, and then he left. It seemed like a typical deal from Craigslist, like the ones I'd done before. I was excited to set up the laptop when I got home. I placed it on my desk, hit the power button, and it started up without any issues. It looked like the previous owner had wiped it clean, so I began installing the apps I usually use, like Google Chrome and VLC Media Player. After setting everything up, I turned the laptop off and went to bed. But later that night, I woke up to an incredibly loud noise. It was the laptop's fan sounding like a jet engine. I was sure I had turned it off, so I was confused. I held down the power button to shut it off again, and then tried to go back to sleep. The next morning, while I was online, I noticed the tiny light next to the webcam flicker. It was brief, but it caught my attention, and I felt something was wrong. Since I don't know much about computers, I took the laptop to a technician at the mall. He checked it for viruses and other issues. Shortly, he told me the laptop had a dangerous virus that could track everything I typed and take control of the webcam without me knowing. Someone could be watching me and gathering my information from afar. This kind of spyware could be used for blackmail. Thankfully, I had only used the laptop for a day and hadn't accessed any sensitive accounts like my bank. I reported this to the police later that day and handed over the laptop. The ad had already been removed from Craigslist, and the phone number I used was disposable, so finding the seller might be impossible. It's scary to think that someone would misuse technology like this. I've bought many items from strangers online, and this was the first time I faced such a problem. We store so much personal information on our devices, it's essential to be cautious. If you buy a used laptop, make sure to reset it completely before using it. From now on, I'll only buy new electronics. And just so you know, I buy new underwear too. I kept my eyes fixed on the road. I'd been driving from the early morning, and now the sky was beginning to darken as the sun set. Every single thing I owned was stuffed into my little car, piled so high I couldn't see through the rear window. It was like playing a giant puzzle with my belongings, trying to make everything fit. I had to do it because going back was not an option. I guess you could say I was searching for a fresh start, a different life. Being a 28-year-old woman and driving alone at night is not the safest choice, especially on deserted stretches of highway like the one I was on. There were hardly any places to stop for a break, and I barely saw any other cars. That's why I felt a bit of relief when I saw a sign saying there was a McDonald's just 2 km away. I'm not a big fan of their food, but something about this place was pulling me in. I felt like I had to stop there. At the very least, I could grab a coffee. As I got closer, the bright red and yellow sign of McDonald's stood out in the emptiness. The area was incredibly isolated, nothing but open fields stretching for miles around. I drove into the parking lot and parked my car far from any of the light posts dotting the vacant lot. As I walked towards the entrance, the automatic doors slid open. Looking around, I noticed the vast dining area was completely empty. It was just me and the one worker behind the counter. He seemed to be in his mid-40s, a bit heavy, with an unkempt beard. His teeth had a greenish tint that seemed to shine under the harsh fluorescent lighting. He didn't seem to notice me until I was right in front of him. "Oh, hello, what can I get for you?" he stuttered. "Just a coffee, please," I replied. "All right, I need to make a fresh batch. Can you wait a bit?" he asked. "No problem, I'm not in any hurry," I told him. "So, what brings a lone woman like you to such a quiet place?" he asked, leaning over the counter toward me. I quickly explained my situation to him, mentioning that I was searching for a new start and couldn't go back to my old life. As I spoke, I noticed a shift in his expression. He leaned closer, almost whispering. "You know, it might take some time for the coffee. Why don't you join me in the back while we wait?" His breath was foul, like something decaying. "Okay, let's go," I replied, offering him a playful wink. He looked shocked, probably not used to getting anything but negative reactions. It seemed like no one had ever responded positively to his invitation before. As his surprise faded, he nodded. Okay, follow me." Holding my purse tightly, I followed him into the storage room. The moment we entered, I slammed the door shut and locked it. I faced him, seeing his eager grin vanish as he noticed my cold stare. His smile dropped, replaced by a look of confusion and disappointment. It's fascinating how much can be communicated without words. You'd think I just did something terrible to him, but I'm not here to cause harm. Not today, I thought to myself. "What's happening here?" he stammered. Without a word, I reached slowly into my purse and drew out a large butcher knife, fixing my gaze firmly on him. That seemed to answer his question. If there had been anyone else around, they might have heard screams, but we were completely isolated. After dealing with him, I stepped out of the room and poured myself a coffee, taking a moment to relish the quiet. As I walked back to my car, I mentally noted that this was yet another place I'd have to avoid in the future. My cousin Jacob and I were very close when we were kids. As time passed, though, our paths diverged. I went off to college far away, and he stayed in our hometown, now named Cedar Grove, once known as Spokane. Growing up, we spent many summers camping with our families in the thick woods around our homes. That's why I was excited to get a job back in Cedar Grove. It was a chance to reconnect with family and friends I hadn't spent much time with, except during holidays for years. One evening, while Jacob and I were having some drinks, we thought of renting a cabin in the same national forest where we had played as children. "So, you're in?" he asked. "Absolutely. I'll try to take the week off," I replied, full of excitement. The weeks crawled by as I waited for our adventure. I kept staring at the big clock in my office. When it finally struck 5 on the Friday we were set to leave, I laughed out loud with joy. We drove Jacob's truck. He's the outdoor type, while I'm more used to city life. He had all the equipment and knew how to handle everything from wild plants to avoiding dangerous animals like bears and mountain lions. We shared laughs and stories from the past as we drove out of town. I watched eagerly as the city slowly gave way to untamed nature. "This is going to be amazing," I murmured. We reached the cabin at dusk. It was more isolated than I expected. No running water, no electricity, and no phone signal, located an hour's drive down a private road. It was just us, completely alone. We quickly unloaded the truck as the last light of day faded. "I think we should head to bed early to start fresh tomorrow," I suggested. "Exactly what I was thinking," Jacob agreed. I was out as soon as my head touched the pillow. We woke up at dawn, greeted by a stunning sunrise. Keen to check out the trails around us, we didn't waste any time and started our day's adventure right away. The forest was dense and alive with the sounds of nature, but as we walked further, a sense of unease began to creep over me. The trees seemed too close, the shadows too dark. Jacob, usually so confident, seemed a bit on edge too. "Ever feel like we're being watched?" he whispered, scanning the thick undergrowth. I nodded, feeling the chill of the morning air and something else, an unexplainable fear. We continued walking, our steps growing more cautious. The forest seemed to close in around us. The familiar paths of our childhood now felt unfamiliar and menacing. "This place is incredible," I exclaimed, feeling a mix of awe and excitement. "Yes, it's pretty special," Jacob replied, but his voice lacked its usual enthusiasm. I noticed something off in his tone. Usually he was as excited as I was. "Everything okay?" I asked, looking at him closely. "I'm fine, it's just—" He paused, his eyes wide with a hint of fear. "What's up?" I pressed, curious and concerned. "I heard some strange sounds outside the cabin last night. Probably nothing," he dismissed. "Maybe just a wild animal?" I suggested, trying to ease his worry. "Yeah, probably. Don't think too much about it," he said. But as we walked the trails that day, I could tell he was still bothered. Jacob knew wildlife sounds well, so his worry made me uneasy too. As daylight began to fade, we were both tired from our trek. I headed towards the cabin while Jacob went back to the truck to grab some supplies. As I approached the cabin, I noticed footprints in the dirt, footprints that neither of us had made. Suddenly I heard a shuffle behind the cabin. I turned sharply and caught a glimpse of a man's face hiding in the bushes, watching me. He vanished quickly back into the greenery. Someone was definitely out there. I sprinted to Jacob at the truck and hurriedly told him what I saw. Without a word, we jumped into the truck and sped off. We drove slowly down the dark, winding dirt road. The headlights barely lit our path as we tried to escape. Time has passed since that night, and I still think about who that man might have been and what he wanted. Perhaps he was a thief, or maybe his intentions were darker. Despite that night, Jacob and I remain close and refuse to be scared off from enjoying nature. We're planning a big river rafting trip next summer with a bunch of friends, safety in numbers, just in case we encounter anything strange again. This story starts when I was expecting my first child. I was 6 months along, and my doctor suggested that I keep active since moving around would help both me and my unborn child stay healthy. So I was still doing daily tasks and buying food while my husband was at his job. We lived in a fairly sized town that was big enough to have a Target, and I often shopped there. I don't really like going because the large number of people and the bright lights bother me, but the low prices and the convenience of finding everything in one place make it worth it. One weekday afternoon, I drove to Target. The sky was covered with heavy clouds that hid the sun, and it looked like it might rain, but there wasn't a single drop as I pulled into the nearly empty parking lot. I parked close to the front door. Being pregnant, I could use the parking spots meant for disabled people right at the front. When I stepped out of my car, I noticed a man parked nearby. He was of average height, had tidy hair, and wore a button-down shirt. He stood by a van with dark windows and was handling a big box that seemed to contain a TV. His right arm was in a cast, which probably explained why he was using one of the disabled parking spots. He smiled at me, and I nodded back politely. I didn't think much of this encounter and went inside to do my shopping. I picked up some groceries and a few items for the baby. After about half an hour, I checked out and headed back the way I had come. When I walked out of the store, I was shocked to see the man still there by his van. He should have left by then. As I got to my car and unlocked it, I heard someone speak from behind me. "Excuse me, ma'am, I'm very sorry to disturb you, but could you help me with this box?" he asked, showing his cast-covered arm. He was very polite and calm. I felt like I could trust him. "I just need help with this last box. It's difficult with just one arm," he continued. "Sure, I can help," I replied. "I've always been someone who cares a lot about others. I couldn't miss a chance to help someone who needed it." We walked to his van together, and when we reached it, he asked me to climb inside the van to get the box from him. I know how strange this sounds, but he seemed so nice and well-mannered that I didn't find it weird at the time. However, when I peered into the van, I saw a pile of boxes and noticed eyes looking at me from behind them. There was someone else in there. Suddenly, everything clicked in my mind, and I sprinted back to my car as fast as I could. As I drove away, I saw the man's friendly smile turn into a furious frown as he watched me leave. When I got home, I told my husband everything. Looking back, I realized how foolish I was to follow him to his van. I remembered watching a documentary about Ted Bundy, the serial killer who used the same trick, including pretending to have a broken arm. Often people pretend to be hurt to get sympathy from those they want to trick. We usually feel safer around someone we think can't harm us, and a fake injury can make us let down our guard. Needless to say, we called the police about the man, but I never heard if they caught him. Back in 2014, things got really spooky one night, and it's a story that sticks with me even now. Most people I tell it to think I'm either making it up or that I've lost it. But my friends and I, we know it's true. Since that night, I'm completely convinced there's something supernatural out there. Not necessarily ghosts or demons, but something really unsettling, something beyond what we understand. So there we were, up in Tom's attic, just me, him, and Ethan. We were hanging out, taking turns at playing video games like Halo and Call of Duty. Tom only had 2 controllers, so one of us always had to watch and wait for their turn. Suddenly, Tom turned the volume down and signaled us to be silent. Right then, we all heard what seemed like a scream unlike any other. It was a chilling, twisted kind of scream that Tom whispered he had heard before. Remember, it was 1 a.m. in a quiet part of town with just one dimly lit street lamp outside. Through the faint light, we caught a glimpse of a very tall figure darting across the street like a deer. The scream faded slowly as the figure moved further away from us. "What was that, Tom?" I asked, my voice shaky. "It's a ghost," he replied. "What do you mean, a ghost?" "Seriously, you saw that too, right?" Tom continued, his face pale in the dim light. "If you can sit there and tell yourself that was just a person or some unknown animal, then fine. But that was no animal, and it definitely wasn't a person. I have no idea what it was. My guess is as good as yours." By then, whatever it was had completely disappeared, and the screaming had stopped. Tom kept looking out the window, his eyes wide like he was seeing something horrifying. "Tom, hey man, are you all right? Maybe you should sit down and drink some water." But then, he just started to cry. The weight of what we'd just seen hit him hard, and he couldn't hold back his tears. He finally told us that he'd been seeing things like this for years, but no one believed him, not even his own parents. They thought he was losing his mind. I think part of him was relieved that we'd finally seen it too. It wasn't good that we were scared too, but maybe it helped him feel less alone knowing he wasn't imagining things. But there was also a terrifying side to it. Now that he knew for sure it was real, it was even more frightening. Tom mentioned he still hears it sometimes, but tries to ignore it, hoping nothing worse will happen. We all hoped the same, clinging to a thin hope that maybe, just maybe, it wouldn't come back. When I think about what happened after I ended things with my ex-boyfriend, it sends chills down my spine. For safety reasons, I won't mention his name. We had been friends for a while before we started dating in my junior year of high school, but soon after we became a couple, he turned into a completely different person. It was a shocking change. At first he seemed just fine, but then his true nature showed up. He began to check my phone every day. He would suddenly grab it from me and go through all my messages and photos. He did this because he felt insecure, even though I never gave him any reason to doubt me. I was always open and faithful to him. From the start of our relationship, I knew something wasn't right. I wanted to leave him, but whenever I tried, he made me feel guilty. He would say he was sorry and promised to change. He even lied about going to therapy and taking medicine for his anger issues. But nothing changed. He kept accusing me of being unfaithful, sometimes just hours after his promises to change. He would yell at me, insult me, and even threaten to hurt himself or me. I don't think he was using drugs, but honestly, we were never close enough for me to be sure. I couldn't understand why he acted this way or thought it was okay. By the time my senior year came around, I had enough. I decided to break up with him for good. But that decision only made things go from bad to terrifying. It got much, much worse. After I broke up with him, I thought I had seen the worst. But I was wrong. I didn't realize people could be this cruel and relentless. To escape from his grip, I changed my phone number and moved with my best friend to a new apartment 45 minutes away. I started feeling a bit hopeful, happy to leave behind such a dark chapter. But within a few days, he began appearing wherever I was. Places like the movie theater, the tennis courts, and even restaurants we had never visited together. He always tried to talk to me, but I would quickly leave and tell him I was busy. His anger would flare up whenever he saw me with any guy, even if it was just my cousin. He couldn't handle it. To this day, I still can't figure out how he always knew where to find me. It was terrifying. He insisted it was all just a coincidence. A few months later, I moved an hour away to college, hoping that would end everything. But then, a tragedy struck. A close friend of ours took his own life, and I returned home for the funeral. He was there too. Out of respect for the situation, I remained civil. After the service, there was a small gathering at another friend's house. I didn't want to go, but my friends persuaded me. Throughout the event, Max was constantly by my side, trying to be closer than I was comfortable with. He attempted to kiss me and put his arm around me whenever he could. Someone at the party even asked if we were back together, which made everyone stare right at us. Embarrassed, I denied it and left in a hurry. Later, Max managed to get my new number from someone at the party. He bombarded me with calls and texts, leaving voicemails filled with the same old pitiful stories. This harassment continued relentlessly for 5 years. Finally, I moved out of state and cut ties with nearly everyone from my hometown, except a few trusted friends. The phone calls have stopped, I hope for good, but the fear lingers. Whenever I visit my hometown, I'm always anxious, always looking over my shoulder, worried that I might see him again. One afternoon during my second year of high school, I was sitting in a classroom when my friend Alex texted me, inviting me to hang out after classes ended. I agreed, but mentioned I needed to check with my mom first. Our plan was simple: chill at the nearby park until our buddy Leo finished his football training. After that, we planned to head to a small diner in the town center, not far from the park. Alex and I were messing around in the park, waiting for Leo. We started shooting hoops to kill time and warm up for a friendly basketball match against each other. Suddenly, an unfamiliar older man began approaching us. He looked to be in his 30s, and it struck me as odd because we were just 15, and he was a complete stranger. Naturally, I felt uneasy and cautious. The man struck up a conversation, claiming he once coached a high school basketball team in a town nearby. He asked what we were up to, and I explained we were waiting for another friend. At first, he didn't seem strange. He joined in our game and shared a few laughs with us. I thought to myself, okay, he seems all right. He just appeared to be a bored dad with nothing better to do, nothing to worry about. But soon Alex had to rush off. His mom called him about a mishap at school, and it turned out he wasn't even supposed to be out with me. So, It was just me and this man who introduced himself as Matthew, though I would later learn that wasn't his real name. My anxiety spiked after Alex left. Shortly after his departure, Matthew proposed something odd. "Hey, how about we head to my place? My son is about your age and I've got a basketball hoop. We could all play together. My car's just over there," he suggested, pointing towards a shabby old white van parked nearby. Yes, it was exactly the kind of van you'd expect in a creepy scenario. The park, which had been filled with the comforting sounds of children playing and the occasional bark from distant dogs, suddenly seemed too quiet. My heart pounded louder with each passing moment, the cheerful afternoon turning tense as the shadows grew longer with the setting sun. Right then, I was sure something was terribly wrong. I declined his offer, saying maybe another time because I was waiting for my friend. He pressed on. "Why not ditch your friend for today? You really remind me of my son, and he could use cool friends like you," he insisted, followed by a strange laugh and an unsettling smile. I firmly said no again and started to run, shouting for help. My screams caught the attention of several people nearby. A family who was enjoying a picnic with their 2 small children, much younger than me, came to my aid. The man who had called himself Matthew dashed to his van and drove off hastily before anyone could spot his license plate number. That family might have saved my life, and I'm deeply grateful for their help. I was lucky there were other people around. Kind strangers who were quick to assist. The father of the family called the police as I explained the situation, and the mother helped me calm down and contact my mom. Soon after, my mom arrived in a rush from her work. We went home after speaking with the police. I described the man and the incident in detail to the officer. Several months later, that same man appeared on the news, linked to over 5 kidnappings in the last 2 years. He had been abducting both boys and girls, locking them away in a basement. I won't go into the horrors of those events. Just know it was truly horrifying and sickening. The memory of that day haunts me constantly. Some days it overwhelms me, and I often have nightmares about him. Thankfully, he is now in prison for a very long time. It's hard to believe that such evil people exist. On the chilly evening of October 31st, 2018, I found myself celebrating Halloween, a tradition I've cherished since childhood. At 14 years old, along with 2 buddies, Sam and Mia, we ventured into the familiar streets we knew so well, dressed in costumes and ready for an adventurous night of trick-or-treating. We were typical teenagers, roaming the neighborhood, enjoying the spooky festivities as we always had. However, this Halloween was different. Throughout the night, a mysterious figure dressed entirely in black haunted our steps. He wore a black hoodie, trousers, shoes, gloves, and a ski mask that hid his face completely. He blended into the shadows, making him nearly invisible until you were close enough. Every few minutes, we noticed him standing across the street, silently watching us without moving. When we looked away, he would vanish, only to reappear somewhere else nearby. At first, we joked about his presence, teasing him from afar, believing he was just another Halloween prankster. Yet as the night drew on, the man's persistence grew unsettling. After 2 hours of this eerie game, my patience wore thin. I finally shouted across the street, telling him to back off and leave us alone. I tried to sound as calm as possible, but my voice carried a sharp edge of annoyance. I regretted my outburst almost immediately, fearing it might provoke him. Despite my warning, the man remained still, his gaze fixed on us as intensely as before. "Man, that guy's a creep," Sam muttered. I nodded, feeling a mix of frustration and unease. It was kind of funny at first, but now it's just weird. We all agreed and decided to move on, hoping to leave the unsettling stranger behind. As the night came to a close, our group gradually dispersed. Some friends lived close by and walked home alone, while others, like Mia, stayed in the neighborhood. Eventually, it was just Sam and I walking together, sharing our worries about the strange man possibly lurking nearby. Trying to lighten the mood, Sam teased me about being scared, suggesting the man was merely pulling a Halloween prank. Despite his reassurances, I couldn't shake off a nagging sense of dread. Soon our paths split and I continued alone, the silence around me feeling heavier with each step. The thought of the man following me sent chills down my spine. It was then, in the dim light of the street lamps, that I noticed a shadowy figure standing at the intersection ahead, directly in the center of a four-way stop, ominously still and waiting. My heart raced as I realized I was still a good distance from my house. The mysterious man who had been shadowing us all night was there again, dressed entirely in black. As I approached, his unblinking gaze met mine, intensifying the eerie atmosphere. The road home required me to pass right by him. With each step closer, I tried to act as if I hadn't noticed him, but my eyes involuntarily darted his way every few seconds. "What do you want from me? Do you think this is fun, scaring someone like this?" "I'll call the cops, you know. This isn't funny at all, it's sick," I shouted, more to embolden myself than in hope that he would respond. To my dismay, he began to walk towards me. Panic surged through me, but just as he took his first step, I reached the corner I needed to turn. I sprinted, my fear lending speed to my legs. I couldn't believe my fortune when just then, a police car turned onto my street. The officer, noticing my distressed run, quickly drove up to me. Breathlessly, I explained the night's events and pointed out the man. It turned out the police had received several complaints about him already. They took action immediately. The officer confronted him, and when questioned, the man tried to flee but was swiftly apprehended. The police arrested him for harassment and evading arrest. I didn't stop to watch. I ran all the way home, shaken by the encounter. It was deeply unsettling that he chose to target me when I was alone. I later heard he was released on bail a few days after. The thought that he was out there still sends shivers down my spine. I can't shake the feeling that his intentions were far darker than just a Halloween prank. When I was around 11 years old and my sister Anna was 13, we used to sleep in the living room of a small caravan parked near the town of Lakeshore. This caravan was at a campsite where our family stayed every year. It wasn't the most exciting place, no fun activities or playgrounds. To pass the time, Anna and I would take walks, play chess, or just mess around. It was 1998, and video games like Castlevania and Donkey Kong were out, but to me, they were just boring. I always looked forward to going home so I could play on the PC, especially games like Theme Hospital. But I also loved to read. I had a collection of books about ghosts, UFOs, and mysterious creatures. I would find these books at library sales or charity shops in our town. My favorite stories were the ones about real unexplained events, like the Dover Demon or the Gulf Breeze sightings. There was an old quarry across from our campsite, and sometimes at night, I liked to imagine that the two red lights I saw were the eyes of the Mothman coming to haunt us. I was just a kid with a very big imagination. I never really thought anything truly scary would happen to us. If you ever feel something weird, it's probably just your mind playing tricks, right? One early morning, I woke up at about 6:20 a.m. It was a dull gray outside. The sun had just risen, but it was hidden behind fog and clouds, making it dim. I felt strangely uneasy because I usually slept until at least 9 a.m. It was completely quiet, and even Anna, who normally snored, was silent. Suddenly, I heard a series of thuds right outside the caravan near the window. It sounded like the pounding hooves of a galloping horse. I started to panic a bit. Could a horse have gotten loose from somewhere nearby? That seemed unlikely since I'd never seen a horse in this area, and the sound didn't seem heavy enough to be a horse anyway. Then I heard the noise again, this time so loud that the entire caravan shook, and I could feel the ground vibrating beneath us. It was strange that I was the only one awake. My family seemed to be sleeping right through the commotion. The noise circled the caravan, growing fainter as it moved toward where my parents were sleeping, and then louder as it came back near me. It had the rhythm of a horse's gallop, but I couldn't hear the sound of 4 legs. It was more like someone running incredibly fast, but no human could make that much noise on the soft ground. The sound continued to circle around us for what felt like an eternity. Eventually, it began to fade into the distance. Whatever it was, it seemed to have run off. I finally started to relax a little, thinking over the bizarre incident that had just occurred. Maybe I was still half asleep, caught in a weird dream. Then the noise returned, louder and more regular this time. I decided to risk a whisper. "Anna, are you up?" Her voice trembled as she replied, "Yes." I asked, "Can you hear that too?" She whispered back, "Yes. What in the world is it?" I admitted, "I don't know," and added, "I'm too scared to look outside." She asked, "Why?" I confessed, "I'm worried it might be something evil." Anna shuddered with fear, and I could tell she was truly terrified. There we were, me at 11 and her at 13, both of us trembling in our beds. The noise kept going. Anna was close to tears, and somehow our parents were still sound asleep. Suddenly a thud hit the other end of the caravan, as if whatever was outside had brushed against it. The thing was touching the caravan now, moving closer and closer with each round. I was stuck, frozen in fear. Should I wake our parents? Should I dare to look outside? I just couldn't move. I pulled my blanket tighter around me. After what felt like forever, the sound started to fade away once more. I promised myself that if the noise returned, I would muster the courage to look, but it didn't come back. Our parents woke up around 8 a.m., prepared breakfast, and gradually the fog cleared. We asked them if they had heard anything strange during the night. They hadn't noticed anything at all. There were no marks on the caravan to suggest something heavy had hit it. Apart from Anna and me, there was no sign that anything had happened, except for one detail, a strange, rough footprint outside the front door, shaped almost like a hoof. To this day, I regret not looking outside to see what was there. But now, when I wake up in the middle of the night and everything feels off, I remember why I was so afraid.